We're live! Hello, word nerds! Sorry we're a little bit late today, but technology is but we're here, and we're going to be talking about villains today, and we're so excited because villains are one of the most fun things to fangirl / fanboy about. So we're going to start by talking about our favorite kinds of villains, or if there's a specific villain, our favorite villain. So we'll go down the line from my screen, which is Kaylin, then Emma, then Erica, then Erin, then Kelly, then me.
My favorite villain is going to be Umbridge from Harry Potter. It was like I was telling them earlier, like whenever people think of Harry Potter and villains, Voldemort is the first one that always comes up. And this is going to kind of negate on something that I'm probably going to mention a little later, but I kind of like how Umbridge has absolutely no redeeming qualities. Like, she is by far the worst woman, character, man thing that I have ever come across in a book, and she's by far my favorite.
Emma?
I was trying to think of one that I specifically really like. I really liked President Snow in the Hunger Games as a villain, because he's just like so perfectly creepy. And like every time he would confront Katniss, like I started getting really nervous. Like I felt like he was really well done in that part. And I think like Donald Sutherland in the movies has made him like even more my favorite villain because he's done such a great job of playing him. But I already really liked him in the books, and I like characters like that are like kind of creepy. And also he's not so much this, but I really like villains that think they're doing the right thing. And aren't just like, I'm just going to be evil because I want to be an evil person. But we kind of talked about this with Across the Universe, like villains that think they're doing what's best. I really like that idea.
I love the way she describes how he smells too, like roses and blood. It creeps me out every time.
So she just uses the roses to cover the scent of blood.
Alright, Erica.
Alright, I don't think I have one specific favorite villain in literature. It's kind of a lot of like President Snow or Coin later on in the books. Also, the King in the Throne of Glass series, I think he's like really creepy, and just like also some of the assassins later on in the series are sufficiently evil for me. I like sympathetic villains who I'm like, I almost can see their point of view, but it's like I don't necessarily think it excuses you from what you're doing. But like Emma said, people who think they're doing the right thing and just are going just terribly wrong. Or, on the flip side, completely 100% ruthless characters who don't care what they're doing and don't have any other vision except for just causing pain or getting success, and that don't necessarily have a tragic background of like, oh, she was hurt by this person or he was hurt by this person, that's why he's acting out. Just people who are like unapologetically evil are a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I said with a smile.
Erin.
Actually, my favorite villain of all time is, how do you say her name? Bellatrix from Harry Potter? Bellatrix, yeah. And then just the actress who played her, I also don't know how to pronounce her name. Does anyone know?
Helena Bonham Carter.
Helena Bonham Carter. She's married to Tim Burton.
She just made it even better. She was just perfect for the role, but I also loved her in the book series. I have a really big soft spot for like crazy witches, pretty much. Like I also really love the White Witch from Narnia. So those are my favorites.
Right, Kelly.
I'm kind of going to combine Erica's answer of like just unapologetically evil with Erin's crazy characters and go with the Queen of Hearts from Alice in Wonderland. She's just crazy and has all this power, and like sometimes she thinks she's on your side when she likes you, but she can just flip it. So she's hard to guess where she's coming from, and you can't keep up with her, and it makes for an interesting type of story.
That's cool.
Very true.
Mine is a little bit different. I love when main characters are acting almost as villains against themselves, like when it's against themselves internally, like in Fangirl, where Kat has to like overcome and embrace some of the problems that she has, or going along the same vein when like someone is acting as an antagonist who is like related, like Kat having to deal with Ren's crazy behaviors. I love that because I feel like the main character obviously doesn't want the antagonist or the villain dead or anything. They want to help, And that fascinates me because a lot of villains you look at and it's like, well, they just can't be helped. They just gotta die. But I love the ones that can be helped. So a lot of us talked about the villains that are just crazy. So I was wondering what you guys think is a good way to write a crazy villain that still seems multidimensional.
I think you have to have some kind of reasoning behind them being crazy. Like, they can be absolutely just off the rails and, you know, killing everybody, but they have to have some kind of belief that, like, why are they doing it? If it's just to kill a bunch of people, then that has to be a clear reason. But usually, for more complex characters, they have a deeper reason than just, I just feel like being evil today. You know, but you can write a simply evil character well, like the Joker was just evil to be evil. It's complicated.
That's actually kind of like part of my issue with the second half of the Mortal Instruments series with Sebastian as a villain is like he's evil just because his dad like put demon blood in him. Like that's like the only reason for it. You know, like it has nothing to do with like personal beliefs or anything that's happened to him. It's just like, oh, well, I have this demon blood, so I'm evil now. Which I mean, like, and it works, but also like a lot of times his character as a villain kind of feels like it's just like a storyline tool so that things can happen, you know? That she can just make him do whatever she needs him to do.
There definitely has to be a method to the madness, I think. Like, it's even like the White Witch, and like I'm also thinking of the lady from the Golden Compass. I can't remember her name, but she was really well done too, and she was a little bit crazy, but there was definitely an agenda behind all of her actions. So, yeah.
Yeah, this kind of goes with, I like a well-rounded villain, and the one that I most recently read that comes to mind is, I don't remember her name, but from Divergent. I like the villains who think they're doing something good. So, like your background characters and your minor characters, they deserve their own story. But with your villain, in your villain's own story, they're the hero.
Yeah.
So I really like how that pulls through to where, for us, even if it's just for a second, you think, okay, are they really the villain in this one, or are they actually trying to do something good?
I like wondering if they're actually on to something good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
it should be that you can turn around and write an entire book about your villain. Like, there has to be enough fact.
And Divergent's actually a good example because it has a few different... Oh, we lost Erin. I was going to say, we have a few different kinds of villains. Like, I thought Janine was done really well because she did have this point of view, and she thought that she was, like, doing them a service by holding back certain information and doing what she did with all the serums and everything. But then there are characters like Peter. Is that his name?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was just, like, messed up. And there didn't really seem to be a huge reason behind it other than just, like...
It's just his personality.
A bad guy.
Yeah.
But I could believe that there was a reason, we just didn't get into it. Because, like, in real life, you meet crappy people, and, like, I'm sure they all have reasons for being crappy people, but you don't necessarily get to know all of them. That just... Sometimes I think, like, people are drastically different from your characters.
Yeah. I think part of the thing about, like, Peter was, like, at the end of the book, spoiler alert for Allegiant, he, like, wipes his memory, but then he, like, becomes a crappy person again. You know, like, starting completely fresh, he still becomes a crappy person, so.
I guess that begs the question, like, are you born with an evil nature, or do you become
born
evil?
Nature and nurture.
Wickedness rest upon them.
Yeah. And I watch lots of Once Upon a Time, so I tend to think that evil's created.
Yep.
But yeah, that also, like, with Once Upon a Time, it's not, like, evil. There is no, like, just evil. These characters are selfish or power hungry, or there's no just, like, it's very rare to find just an evil character.
They've all had something happen in their past that has, like, pushed them towards
Why I love them.
They're never, like, 100% evil. Like, I'm right now finishing up Orange is the New Black, finally. And, you know, when you look at it, it's a story about a bunch of people in jail for doing crimes, so you're like, oh, they're bad people. But they're not. They're, like, gray people. There's a lot of gray areas because they're good people who just were in a bad situation, or good people who got caught in one bad moment, or bad people who are trying to correct themselves. It's like, it's a good character study.
Yeah.
Also just a good show. If you're of age.
if you're on vacation.
Because it's a bit inappropriate.
Oh man.
Do we
have
have so much stuff before we started, but now I'm like, where were we?
Well, I got the list that Kaylin sent over, the 7 laws of successful villains. We can go through that.
Yeah, let's do that.
Number 7's my favorite, but we can start with number 1.
The first one is, a good villain is never passive, so they have to act upon the hero or protagonist, or both, and make stuff happen.
A good villain is a lot like a good protagonist in that way.
Yeah.
They're motivated to do something. We touched on that a little bit earlier about how they have to have a point of view and actually, carry out their point of view, and they're not just sitting back and everyone's like, you're so evil.
I'm so guilty of writing like that. Like, I know who I want my ultimate villain to be, but I give them cronies who do all their work for them, and then they make the ultra bad villain.
But they can
it's a
be pulling
problem.
the strings. Like, manipulation can be super evil,
Mm-hmm.
Thinking of a certain character in Orange is the New Black. I will not get into that. Number 2 is they complement, not compliment the hero. With
They don't tell them how beautiful they are all the time.
Yeah, like as they're punching them, you have really beautiful eyes.
Oh, that could be what you're doing.
I like your perseverance. You fight very hard.
Although sometimes it can be really creepy if a villain throws in.
Yeah,
like
I was
a
just going to say,
compliment
that
here
kind
and
of
there.
ties in with number 7, too.
Yeah. I
Go ahead.
do think it is really important. Like, I know a lot of times we'll read about these villains who are like middle-aged men fighting against teenage girls.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like there has to be some connection there, because otherwise it just doesn't make sense for a middle-aged man to be worried about a 17-year-old girl.
Just so we know, Erin said her network kicked her off, so she'll just be chatting in the comments below and on Twitter, so look for her there. Internet!
We're at the internet. Just kidding, I love it.
Speaking of compliment versus compliment, I also just remembered I love villains who are like crazy calm or like super sweet, and then they like snap.
Yeah,
they're like very sweet, and then just they do something. You're like, whoa, okay, this is real.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have a villain coming up that I'm really excited to write, who's going to be kind of sweet.
Is this cut?
Yeah.
That's as soon as you start talking about it, I'm like, I know that's where her head's at.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much number 7 on the list, is that the villain, I really love a charismatic villain.
Mm-hmm.
And the, BBC version of Sherlock with Moriarty, I think did amazing, because he has that sinister quality to him, but he's also, and who else? Loki also has that likability about him. You're like, why are you so evil, but you're so precious at the same
It's also
time?
because they're like 3-dimensional. They're not like, I'm just evil and that's the only personality trait I have ever. They've got like other stuff.
It's like going back to President Snow, like that new teaser that they did for Mockingjay, watching it, I'm like, I want to believe him. I want to just follow him. Like he's just seems so calm and sure, and he has to be a great leader. It's Donald Sutherland.
You guys remind me of Santa. Like I was watching this week, and I was like, I just
like a
want you to
calm
win a
and
little
cool
bit.
Santa. He's
The whole time I'm like,
protect
Mr.
you.
Bennett, he's so kind.
Yeah, I always got it.
It took me 2 views of it to realize that it was actually PETA standing next to him, and then when I realized it, I was like, my heart hurts now. This is terrible. This is gonna suck.
Oh
One of
man.
the things that I love that they added in the movies, I think added even more to President Snow's character, was with his granddaughter.
Yes.
And how she'd be like, oh, I want to live like that. Or she's got the braid in her hair and that looks like Katniss's, and she's like, everybody wears their hair like this. It just added this extra,
And
more of a reason for him to not want her to rub off on
And
them.
she was mentioned in Mockingjay in the book, but only touched upon when they were voting of should we start the Hunger Games again? And he'd be like, well, President Snow has a granddaughter, but this you see her, and now when that comes up in the movie, you're gonna be like, she is a little kid.
I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it.
Yeah, and I think the charismatic leader thing is particularly important if your villain is in charge of something, like if it's like a dystopian and they're in charge of the government or something like that, like, because it really bothers me when there's a villain and they are like ruling over the society or a group or something. It's like, how did they get to that point? Like, who would actually like this?
Yeah, even Voldemort and the Death Eaters, there has to be something that makes people follow them. Unless you're looking at like a serial killer or something, charisma is kind of a must.
Yeah, so if they're leading anything, they need to be charismatic in some way. There needs to be a reason people would follow them.
Yeah. Agreed.
I don't want their cronies to just be like these idiots that are just like, yeah, I'll just do whatever they say. It's like, where did they get these people?
I really do like villains, though, and this is weird, but I like villains that I kind of root for, that I'm like Dexter could be considered a villain in the TV show because he kills a bunch of people, but I'm like rooting for him. I'm like, yeah, you kill those people, you get away with it. Maybe I should be rooting for someone that, but you know, like, he's a bad guy.
Megamind. I'm like, kill Metro Man. Or Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog. That's like great.
Yeah.
You're like rooting for the whole time. You're like, yes, kill everyone and get Penny.
Sometimes villains are just the best. Or Spider-Man. I was rooting for Doc Connors because I'm like, you're so smart. You're better than your lizard brain that takes over. It's fine. You'll make it through.
Are there any good books that are from the viewpoint of villains?
There's
I know
one.
Victoria Schwab, her book Vicious. I think that's a new adult.
Oh, I want to read that one. I want to read it really
it's
bad.
definitely on my TBR. I've heard a lot of really good things about it, and I think it's about two brothers that are villains, or maybe one of them is and one isn't. I'm not sure yet. I know it's brothers though.
Yeah.
And in a way, the Mara Dyer series is kind of told through the point of view of a villain, because I mean, she kills a couple people, and like
it's
one
dark.
of them.
I still have to read it.
No, I'm not gonna say who, but like, you know, things happen, and you're like, are you a good character or a bad character? I love you either way.
Marissa Meyer has one coming up that is a prequel to Alice in Wonderland from like how
the Red Queen.
Yeah.
I saw the cover. It's so pretty.
And if anyone's read her current series, Marissa Meyer does fairy tale retellings very, very well.
Yes.
Yeah, she does.
So I'm excited about that one.
Looking in the comments. Erin is jumping around in the comments. So we've got a comment from Hannah that says Warner is her favorite villain.
Yes.
Yep. That's all we'll say.
Yes.
We're going to really have to do a Word Nerd book chat about this soon so that we can talk with spoilers, because it's getting difficult for me.
I have lots of feels about it.
Yeah. And that one I feel like we'll have to do the whole series. It can't just be... Like,
yeah. The series it blurs together for me because so little happens in the first book and the first half of the second book that all the excitement for me was in like the last 1.5 books, which is probably good. It follows like a good 3-act structure
It's
for
really
a trilogy.
I can't. So let's not.
Okay.
We have a few more comments. We've got one from Erin. This the musical Wicked, which I brought up earlier. There's a book that Wicked, the musical, is based on. I think the book came first.
The book came first, and it's much darker.
Yeah, and that's told through the Wicked Witch's point of view. I was the Wicked Witch in a high school play, by the way. Couldn't watch the Green Up for days.
I've seen pictures, just so people know.
Couldn't watch the Green Up for days. Went to school with it. Also, she said reminded her of Maleficent.
Oh, yeah. I haven't seen that one yet.
I haven't seen it. I heard really good things.
I haven't seen it, but Maleficent as a kid, like that villain, she turns into a dragon. How are you going to be a dragon?
What is the character arc?
How does that happen?
What do I need to do now so I can be a dragon later?
Yeah.
Is there like vitamins for it?
Or like a simple surgery.
Yeah, or speaking of dragons, Game of Thrones has tons of characters who are both good and evil. And I think that's done really well because it's like you're trying to be good, but there are so many choices you are making that are not. Or then there's just like Joffrey who's like, you are the
I was going to say, Joffrey, there's no good in that kid.
Yeah.
He's a child, so you're like, is that good?
Yeah, that's where sometimes you get a psychopath every now and then that you don't need to define really. He's just nuts.
But he was done so well that like I didn't feel that there needed to be some grand explanation behind it, because it's like, well, you know, inbreeding can kind of do some damage. So not excusable because he did a lot of stuff, but
and that's probably where it came from, because like the family, I forget the Targaryens, that they were all inbred, and a lot of them were crazy. So that's probably where that came from.
I mean, it can't help. She might have had a disposition for it anyway, you know, predisposed to be evil and just awful, but that didn't help.
Well, Tommen seems like such a nice kid. He'll be okay.
He's so cute. So more off of the 7 laws of villains. Number 3 and 4. 3 is teaches something, and 4 is never 100% bad, which we were just talking about. I read that earlier. 5 is has his or her own story. So a villain has to be well-rounded as the hero. Some backstory. I think when it comes to backstory, you don't have to write it in the book, but you better damn sure know it, because that could definitely help small attributes for them.
Yeah, and I think knowing that little, like their backstory, it'll affect the little things that they say or the way they behave. And it makes a big difference between just like, he's blowing up this hospital just for fun versus he's blowing up this hospital because his mom died in it or something.
Yeah.
Well, that's where, even though Voldemort's very much a kind of a one-note villain, his backstory is great. That you have so many layers there.
Right, and that if the antagonist and the protagonist have that history, the villain's history will also be woven into the actual story, because, you know, your antagonist grows up, you know, with this, you know, in his head that this guy's bad, and you kind of get that little bit as you go.
Right. I forgot what I was gonna say. I lost it.
Yeah, it goes back to the whole, like, there has to be a reason the villain, like, you know, there's some reason the villain is the way they are, and it's probably something in their backstory. So that's kind of what it all goes back to in the end, is that they need to have something in their background that has made them into the person they are.
And it can definitely help with pre-writing if you, like, sit down and just write the villain's backstory and do, like, just a scene or, like, a pivotal scene in their life and kind of work through that. And then, I mean, you can save it. You don't have to put it in your book, but you could use it as, like, extra features on a website later on, or you can use it to, again, influence, like we were talking, small mannerisms that they may have picked up from childhood, or small, like, prejudices because of their past.
Or even novellas. Publishers are really big into novellas.
Yeah, right now, And I love writing about to practice, and I love reading about the moment the villain realizes that the protagonist is going to be their enemy. Like, is it the moment they see them, or does it happen sooner? I just love reading that moment through the villain's perspective.
Number 6 and 7, the last two of the 7 laws of successful villains. 6 makes the reader feel, so they have to provoke a range of emotions, sometimes fear or horror, sometimes sympathy for the hero, sometimes it's even sympathy for the villain. So if we can understand their viewpoint, it makes it even better. And then 7 is villain is charismatic, which we touched on earlier, because who's going to put a villain in power if they don't have something redeeming, even if it's in the past, something redeeming about them that made people want to listen.
It could just be fueled by money, too. Because money kind of makes a villain sometimes.
Yeah. Like, Batman could have been a villain really easily.
Yeah. Oh, Batman.
And, like, Lex Luthor is kind of like the evil version of Batman, because he was really rich.
Batman.
Yeah, and I actually had it pulled up. Yeah, I do agree with the, that the villain is, 100%, isn't 100% bad, but I also tend to like those characters who they have no redeeming qualities, like Umbridge. And I recently marathoned Back to the Future this weekend, or no, a couple days, like last week, and they're 3 of my favorite movies of all time. And Biff Tannen in his past, present, and future is by far the scum of the earth. Like, there is nothing about that guy that makes people, that is going to make me like him. Absolutely nothing. And that's part of the reason why he's such an interesting character, because you want, you know, Marty McFly to take him down and, you know, fill his car with manure in every single movie, and that's what makes it so good. So
Some other examples we have in the comments are Clayton from Tarzan, the movie and the musical, which I didn't even think of Tarzan.
It's on Netflix.
Hannah mentioned Lek in the Graceling series, which I have not read.
Yeah,
but
I was thinking of that one as well.
She says he has virtually no page time really in total, but his influence and reach is everywhere, so it's really creepy. Valentine in The Mortal Instruments is brought up by Aaron, and I also will counter with in The Infernal Devices, Mortimer, I believe was the guy's name.
Yeah.
Like an army of robot magic demons. How are you going to fight that again? I think that's what really scares me about demons, when I don't see a way to beat them, or like where they look like they're invincible, even though they're obviously like, there's got to be a weakness, but when you just look at them, you're like, what are we going to do here? Is it going to solve itself? Because I don't see a way out of this. Aaron also brought up a conversation starter, female villains versus male villains. What are the differences, and how do we write them differently?
So I loved one of the things that I saw, I think it was Erica post on Tumblr this week about female villains, because it got me thinking about Oz the Great and Powerful. I was so excited to see that movie. Like, we went and saw it for our anniversary last year because I was that excited to see it. And spoiler alert, all of the villains in the movie are villains because they wanted Oz for themselves. Like, they're all just jealous girls. And I hate that. Like, maybe some evil supervillains come from jealousy over a boy, but why is that more like of a Hollywood norm? Like, that's an acceptable only reason for becoming an evil villain.
Yeah. I'm looking for the post right now. Where is it? Come on. Oh, here it is. It was a post on Tumblr. It was just a text post that said, I want female villains whose backstories don't revolve around men breaking their hearts or wanting to be more beautiful than another girl. I want female villains who are evil for the fun of it, and I want female villains who, with tragic backstories that don't revolve around men. I want female villains with backstories and motives just as diverse and complex as male villains. I'm so sick of female villains who are only motivated by men and girl hate. Amen.
Yes. I hate the girl hate.
Well, because I
the
think
fairest of them all.
Yeah. I think a lot of the problem is most men villains they're just written with like, they want this power and they will do anything to get the power. And then girls are like maybe more about like revenge on something or kind of trying to get even or jealousy. And that can be annoying to read so many times when like if you had a male villain who did that, people might, I don't know, take it differently than they do for, like, it's normal for a girl villain to do that, but a men villain might be called out on it.
One of the things that I loved about Divergent was that Janine was such a good villain. I felt like she had like the creepy factor and she was just whip smart. And it was something that it was like, yeah, you're kind of cool. You scare the freak out of me, but you're kind of cool. And I felt like in switching in Allegiant to the broader world villain, it lost a lot of the strong antagonist. And I don't know, I just loved her.
I also read something, I think it was probably also in Tumblr. It wasn't about writing specifically, but it was about like someone wanting a video game where they start playing as the hero and then the hero has to make all these tough choices, and then by the end of the game, you realize you're the villain. And I was like, hey there.
Ooh.
I want a book like that. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it'd be really cool to see that, like, maybe the origin stories of how somebody became this evil character and, like,
See, you know, that actually brings the video game to mind, because I was just going to say it would be really cool to kind of have, you know, one of your choose your own adventure kind of video games where, depending on the choices that you make, you're a hero or a villain at the end. But that does actually already exist. It's like one of my favorite video games ever. It's called BioShock. And without spoiling anything for anyone who ever actually wants to play it, you run around this underwater, you know, city, and you have to capture these girls. They're called the Little Sisters. And they're, you know, they're evil. So you can either harvest them and gain all of their energy, or you can save them. And depending on how many you save and how many you harvest, or what you do in these situations, the ending is different. I think there's like 2 or 3 different endings. So
That's awesome.
it's really hard to do that with a book, but I think even just going with that one-dimensional, you think you're the good guy, and then holy crap, I'm actually reading the bad guy. That's what I want. Like I want to have that
to
moment.
write it, but it'd be so good.
Yeah, like
And I'd love to see it with like duology form.
yeah.
Where like they realize at the end of book 1 that they're the villain, and then in like book 2 they embrace it.
Yeah, it was like you mentioned earlier how you like that moment where you realize who the villain is, and
Yeah.
I want that image, like, for me reading to stop from like, okay, I'm definitely the villain, right? Like, this main character is the villain. I want that.
Well, originally Frozen was actually written with Elsa being the villain,
Yeah.
I heard that, yeah.
and then they decided to change it after they heard the song "Let It Go" because, like, oh, I get it now. She's not evil. She's been, but it's kind of an interesting character because in a way she is still evil. I mean,
The antagonist.
yeah, she uses her powers not necessarily like trying to do something bad, but negative results from it.
It's like, this might be a bad analogy, but I'm gonna go for it. I got a dog from the shelter, and he has anxiety problems because he's like a year old and lived like 4 different places, including the shelter, before we adopted him. And so because of that anxiety, anytime someone he doesn't know comes into our house, he like growls at them. And he like just tries to scare them off. And I think that's how, like, that's kind of how Elsa is as a villain. Like, she's just scared. And I think that's how some really fascinating villains are. Like, they want to make it seem like they can bite really hard.
Yeah.
When really
Or like
they
you
don't
said,
want to.
the villain within yourself, like the negative person inside, like the negative voice or the negative, like, pushing people away, or like Kath did all of the ways she had to kind of overcome the demons inside of herself. That's always interesting.
I love it.
Now here's a question. How do we write a villain without going cheesy, mustache swirling, ooh, I'm going to tie you to a train track? How do we get realistic villain, still super creepy and, like, don't want to mess with you without going like, okay, we get it. He's a bad guy. Any suggestions?
Gotta think about this one.
Yeah. I don't know. I think persuasion is really big. Like, that ability to manipulate people to where on the surface you think that, you know, they're one thing, but then when you really get into their character and their personality, you realize they're kind of really crappy people. Yeah. That is a hard question.
I think, too, it's so important whether you do it in your first draft process or in revisions. I think it's important to know your villain's timeline as it relates to the story of your protagonist. It's like moves and counter moves. Didn't like President Snow say that? Moves and counter moves. Because a lot of times a villain can feel mustache twirly when it's because they're so distant. Where it feels like the protagonist is always just butting up against them, and the villain never has to change his methods or her methods.
Yeah.
And that shouldn't be the case because your villain is a person, and even if they're the biggest, baddest person out there, like if your protagonist is being a good protagonist, then your villain is going to have to be changing up his or her plays.
I also think it could be really interesting to see a moral villain, like, they do a lot of evil things, but they draw a line at this. Like, they could be killing people, but they're like, whoa, 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 don't, like, abuse animals, dude, you're crossing a line, you know?
Yeah, they have a code.
Yeah, because I believe that, like, everybody has their own beliefs of what is ethical and what is not, and I think villains just have a slightly skewed and different code of conduct to which they apply to their lives, and I think it'd be really, really interesting to see, like, a villain who does a lot of awful things, but then, you know, has a line that he definitely draws, like, I kill people, like, I'm Dexter and I kill people, but I won't eat them because that's just wrong.
Well, I saw the second Amazing Spider-Man movie last night, and it was, like, at the very, very end, there's, like, this random bad guy that it just, like, shows, like, Peter start to have a fight with at the end, like, it's just how the movie ends. But there's this, like, scene where he, like, comes and he's, like, starting to terrorize the city, and he's, like, shooting at all these cops and everything, and he's, like, willing to fight Spider-Man and all this, but, like, a little boy dressed in a Spider-Man suit comes out, and he, like, doesn't shoot the kid. Like, he doesn't shoot at all until they, like, get the kid off, like, until Spider-Man comes and gets the kid off the street, and then he starts fighting Spider-Man. And it was, like, interesting. Like, they didn't really, like, say anything. Like, he wasn't like, oh, I won't shoot the kid, but it was, like, kind of, like, weird to me when I was watching it. I was like, wait, so you're gonna, like, rob this bank and shoot these cops and, like, try and kill Spider-Man, but this little kid dressed up as Spider-Man, you're gonna, like, let him get to safety before you start.
Yeah.
Like, it was really
so cool.
It was also
Because
interesting.
that adds, like, some kind of dynamic to the character. They're, like, they're not, I don't think anyone can be 100% purely, absolutely evil. Like, because everybody has the potential to be evil and everybody has the potential to be good. And there might just be, like, a teeny tiny bit of good, and it might be something as simple as, like, letting an old lady through the door before you, and then, like, you go in and kill everybody. But, you know, polite.
It's like, oh, this isn't spoilery. Yeah, it's not. But that Warner scene where there's a starving dog, and she totally expects him to just go, like, kick the dog or something, and he goes and, like, snuggles it a little and feeds it or whatever. It's amazing.
That was a really well-written scene because, you know, you've seen, up until that point, you've seen Warner, like, kill people and kind of torture other people, and then he goes down and she's like, he's gonna shoot that dog, and I was like, don't shoot the dog!
Please, shoot the people, not the dog!
Please, not the dog! Taylor actually made a really good point in relation to Sherlock. Moriarty is a really creepy villain, but what makes him creepier is that he's freakishly similar to Sherlock, who everybody's rooting for. Lestrade's quote where he says, Sherlock is a great man. In time, he might even be a good one. So I like that dynamic, too, of, like, the villain and the, you know, the hero are very close, and there's just, like, that one thing dividing them.
Because there was that one point on the, like, 7 characteristics of a villain post where they were talking about, like, complimenting the main character or the hero, and, like, they were talking about, like, having them, like, maybe one of the character's strengths is, or the hero's strengths is the villain's weakness, or the or vice versa. But yeah, I really like when they're very, very similar and they have a lot of similarities, but there's something that makes it different. Because, like, that's actually something that's interesting about Voldemort is that him and Harry have so many similar characteristics. But, like, Harry had, like, the love of his friends and, like, the love of his mother protecting him and all that, while, like, Voldemort never had anyone love him. So, like, that one little thing, like, the difference it makes in the two of them. And, like, their choices make such a difference.
Like, Neville versus Peter Pettigrew.
Yeah.
I get goosebumps thinking about that article.
That article's so good.
Unresolved External also said for writing bad guys, for him, the trick is just as simple as not letting the person actually believe they're the bad ones. So the whole, like, I believe that I'm a good person. As I'm doing this, I think I'm serving a purpose. Or as Aaron says, the honor among thieves, like pirates who have a code. Like Captain Hook. He's a good villain.
Sort of not a villain, but...
Well, he was a villain.
He was.
Yeah.
No one's a villain for super long.
This is the evolution of a villain. Yeah, no one's a villain too long for Once Upon a Time.
They either die or someone.
Yeah, they either die or they become good. They either die or find out that they're related to the good people, and so they become good.
And then they get love.
Yep.
Do we have any other questions? We have a lot of
Here's
comments.
Here's one from Books R Us. How do I rate a good fight scene between the villain and the hero? Now this depends if it's like psychological fight scene or like actual physical fight scene. If it's a physical fight scene, watch movies and watch people actually fight and memorize their movements and what people naturally do. Psychological, slowly let them leak into their influence in their life. I think that'd be really creepy. Like,
Yeah.
have them think about them when it's like, I should not be thinking about what this person would be doing next if I do this.
And I think it's definitely cool. Like, I spent a lot of time watching just on YouTube, like, how-to self-defense videos. Because if you have, right now, smaller protagonists are really popular. I'm not saying that's, like, great and you should only write small protagonists, but it is a very, like, David and Goliath, small protagonist versus big antagonist. And so fighting is going to be very different and very self-defense oriented in a physical fight scene that way. So definitely check that out.
It also depends if your villain is a name, like a specific face, because there are a lot of books in young adult where it's kind of like more ambiguous of a villain. You know, there's not one specific person that I can go in and fight. It's just kind of like the structure of the government, for example, or like, you know, there's zombies. A ton of zombies. You're like, well, I got all of the zombies.
Yeah.
I'm gonna fight them. There's no one person I can go
Yeah.
like.
I'm gonna fight this zombie, but that doesn't really accomplish that much.
Oh, and one more thing. Sorry, I'm talking a lot. One more thing. Practice your dialogue, because I think good, tense, conflict-driven dialogue can make a huge difference versus, like, hero is talking to the villain, and the villain's like, you'll never defeat me. I'm much more powerful. Villain monologue. Ha ha ha.
Oh, yeah, having either one
No.
explain their entire plan, nah.
Yeah, no, that doesn't usually work out.
Although that is my favorite part of Phineas and Ferb. Everything he does them up, he's like, I'm gonna tell you exactly what I'm going to
It
do.
worked really great for comedy, not so much for
Yeah.
anything.
You're like a parody villain,
Mhm.
Yeah.
but
You
other
still
than
see
that,
it a lot in like a way of the author trying to show where the villain's motivation came from and stuff.
yeah.
It's hard to do it without just having the villain
yeah,
say.
it's hard not
yeah.
to just kind of like, let me explain why this guy is doing
Yeah.
this, what's happening, so you as a reader knows, and also the character has some bits of information that they'll need later on. Just deal with me for a second, for a paragraph.
Any other villain cliches or anything that bug people?
Oh,
What,
real
you see
quick on
too
the
much of?
dialogue before we get off of that. Make sure you also read your dialogue aloud. That'll show you what's
Yes.
coming across. Like, if you feel the need to cackle, or you do have that mustache twirling, like, it might be a little bit like,
I've got an article in front of me about
hold back.
write a villain, and don't have your villain talk like a cheese ball. I just got a list of like words you see too much of. According, amuse, bothersome, inferior, worthwhile. Like they're using these grandiose words, and you just like all of these words. I'm like, yeah, okay, I see a lot of that. My dear, when they're addressing a female.
My dear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or well, or just all those.
I like that should be big.
I know.
Yeah. Finger
That's
staples.
Boogie and Nightmare Before Christmas.
Yeah.
Well.
See,
I
I think
hate-
that like people use that now as more of a like I caught you doing something really embarrassing, more or less.
Yeah.
I'm a villain and I'm gonna get you.
Yeah.
Another
Another one on this list is be careful having your villain smirk too much, or like have those
yeah.
notebooks. Or
Mulder.
That reminds me, you know who's a great, not bad smirking villain? It's the. Have you guys ever seen the American version of Sherlock Elementary? Watch it. It's so good because, well, Lucy Liu, but also Moriarty in it is Natalie Dormer. And just, it is the best Moriarty I've ever seen. And she's so dynamically written, and then Moriarty starts getting like this fascination with Watson instead of only Sherlock. That's one of my favorite villains.
now I need to watch that.
It's really good. Arya said Cersei Lannister is one of her favorite villains.
She's
Ah.
Yeah, I wanted to bring her up when we were talking about females because she's a great one of like she has the same issues that a male in her position would have, that
Yeah.
power and more bringing honor to her family and getting as much.
And her evilness isn't driven by like he broke my heart or this
No.
person offended
Well,
me. What
I feel like-
offensive, but
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a little bit of her attitude, like in the later seasons, comes from Jamie, which is kind of like a, oh, you broke my heart kind of weird,
Yeah.
ugly thing. But most of it just comes from, like, I don't know, like, a lot of it has to do with the way she's brought up, and, like, her son's an a-hole, so that has a lot to do
Yeah.
with it. But she does it she pulls it off very well.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And I do like on the flip side of the whole doing it for love motivation that like a lot in fantasy you see a lot of girls just sold off to the highest bidder and you know they get assigned their husband. That would, affect your
Yeah.
entire life. So seeing
I'm
like
pretty
how
sure.
Cersei was shaped by she had to marry Robert Baratheon even though
yeah. I don't think saying, a villain doing this because of love or because of lack of love or something like that, I think that can be done well as long as it's not done in the same way that it's been done 1,000 times. Because I think it's interesting to see, like, it could be really interesting to read if done well. It's just, you got to make sure you don't fall into those, like, pitfalls of the cliches and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I hate villains that follow like huge stereotypes, like your bad guy's gonna be the Russian mob boss. Like I hate that. And he does all the stereotypical things, and he smokes his cigar and drinks a lot of wine and stuff. I hate when your villain is so. I hate when villains are stereotypical.
I just read a comment from Hannah that I really liked, and it brought me, I was actually going to say, one of my favorite kinds of villains is the unexpected villains that, like, you didn't see coming. She was saying, back to Frozen, I actually think Hans is a really interesting character because he's so manipulative, and the scariest part is that you can see people in real life like him. It's not, like, comically over the top, I'm evil, evil, evil. And Disney came forward with the background story for him, and he exhibited signs of psychopathy because he was the youngest of 13 brothers and horribly neglected, and he knows he's not going to get into power unless he marries into power, and a lot of twist on Prince Charming is what Hannah says.
Although,
I like that.
I almost wanted less of like a ha 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 at the end when it is revealed that he's the villain. He's like, if only someone loved you. I'm like, just kiss her and let her see that you don't love her. But it's Disney. Her first kiss has to be with her true love.
Yeah. But it would have been really interesting to see him kiss her and be like, she kind of realizes, like, wait, but
I'm still
like, oh, I still need to get, okay, maybe I could just take power if you're both dead. Like, figure it out that way, but.
It's still a step in the right direction because as much as I love Disney, they are, like, I can't think of really any villains that have that much motivation besides I'm the villain of this movie.
Yeah.
Mother Gothel was a good villain, though. I think because she was like really manipulative, and it's like, she was so nice to her until things went not the way she wanted them to go, and it was like she's still trying to be like not nice, but like nice enough to get her to come back and like keep her to herself, and just
She's a good villain.
Yeah, and it's cool because she's a villain who's like in the life of the protagonist for the whole
for the whole time. Yeah. And how have we not mentioned Hades? I'm sorry, Hades. Hercules being one of my favorites. I gotta mention Hades. He's a funny villain.
I was literally just thinking about that. It's a villain you enjoy, but you just can't win while the hero also wins.
Yeah. And the way he manipulates Meg into kind of being a villain of her own making.
I love that movie so much.
I love Meg. She's my favorite.
Me too.
Yeah, you said Meg, so that automatically warps me back into Supernatural realm, which brings up Crowley, who was this, terrible guy in the beginning, and now like he's starting to show like the softer side. So that's like a completely reverse to what I'm used to. Usually it's you see this person, you don't know they're the villain, and then boom, there's a villain. But with him, it was like really, really villainous, and then now he's crying.
Yeah, or early on in the series, like earlier on when he realized that he might be losing his power, he tried to be good for a little bit so he could get his power back. Like things like that with it's like, oh, you're a smart villain because you're like, look, I know we hate each other, but I'm gonna lose my chair if we don't like get together and take down this worst person, and then we'll go back to hating each other after.
I also like with like villains. Sorry. I was gonna say, I also like with villains who are like maybe actually trying to reform, and it's hard, you know, like it's not going to be believable if your villain is just suddenly like, oh no, I want to be good now, and it's easy, and I'm going to be good. Because that's something I like in Once Upon a Time with Regina, the evil queen. Like she starts fairly early on in the show, like in season 2, wanting to be good, and she keeps slipping back into like her bad habits, and it's really hard for her because like if you've been doing that for 20, 30 years, however long, most of your life, it's not going to be easy to suddenly like sit down and have dinner with the hero who used to be your enemy, and to not use force to get what you want if that's what you're used to doing. So I really like that about her character, that it isn't easy for her and that it is like a longer process, and that there's still things that kind of like push her back, you know, that like there's like triggers that make her like get mad again. And
2 other TV examples I have is I've been watching Nurse Jackie, and if you don't know the show, it's a nurse who struggles with addiction, and she keeps almost wanting to get better, and then she doesn't. So it's like that internal struggle, but also like there are times when she's like, I don't want to be sober, so she's going out and hurting herself and hurting other people, fully aware that what she's doing is hurting other people. And then I just started watching, I'm on season 2 of Breaking Bad, so Breaking Bad, I mean, the villains are everywhere, but they're also kind of the main character. They're like the anti-hero.
The anti-heroes are very big right now.
Like Jesse Pinkman, who I'm already in love with, and I've told that it's just I'm gonna get more in love with him as it goes on. But you know, like I just watched an episode the other day where he went into a house to, you know, get money back from people who had robbed him of the drugs, and there was a kid there, and he was very sweet to the kid because the kid was living with 2 druggy parents, and he fed him, and he was like, you know.
That was a really good episode for his character development. Oh my god, I remember that episode the most.
But that's like the dynamic of, okay, Jesse came from this place where, you know, he's doing this kind of for himself, but also to help Walter White, and it's just, he goes in here to get his money back, and his purpose is just, you know, wave a gun around, and then there's this kid, and it kind of takes him back, and that's a dynamic character who has a moral compass.
Yeah, there are a lot of dynamic characters in there, and you're only on season 2, so I'm not going to spoil anything, but definitely that is like the top villainous show that I think I have watched so far, that there's so many different forms of villains in that show, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. We've got a monologue from Aaron. Well, 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 I am the Countess of Bath, my dear, and I'm going to kill your mother and steal your map from the back of the painting in your living room wall and use it to find the treasure that your father stole from me all those years ago in order to finance my army of undead soldiers to take over the kingdom because your father, the king, broke my heart. Villain monologue.
Oh, I don't want that to be...
That could
Bravo!
I think it'd be fun to write just one book full of cliches and just have it be a full, like, parody book and be like, like the movie coming out with Amy Poehler and Paul Rudd, the We Came Together, that's just a parody of all of the romantic comedy movies ever made. Very tongue-in-cheek, breaking the fourth wall. Darth Vader. Regina, everybody's fangirling about Regina. She's a well-written character, though. Because I root for her, and then other times I'm like, you stop trying to tear them apart, but also stand up for your son. Interesting fact about Regina in Once Upon a Time, the actress who played her actually had to stand up to the writers to say that the character needed to stand up to, oh my god, I just forgot the main character's name.
Emma.
How did I stand up to Emma when she came back in town to, like, Henry's my son too. So she actually wouldn't have had such a strong relationship with Henry had she not stood up for it because they were just
That's
going to
so
have
awesome.
they were just going to have Henry go to Emma, and she kind of went in there and she's like she's his mom, like maybe not biologically,
Also, like, knowing Regina's character, like she would not have given him up without a fight.
but fine, take him.
I love her because it's like she can't get a break, and every time something starts to go well for her, something terrible happens, and like a protagonist would like take it in stride, but you know that Regina isn't gonna take it in stride. And
It's
that she's
also
gonna do something bad.
It's also interesting because you start to take her side so much and start to like her so much that there's times where you get angry at the protagonist and at the heroes.
Yeah.
Like there
For
have been
messing
times
it
where
up
it's like
for her.
I'm pissed at Emma right now.
They're like
Right?
being mean to her, you know? Because like if something goes bad, they're automatically like, oh, Regina must have done it, you know? And like, yeah, it's like so you get mad at the heroes because of it.
Yeah.
They've done a really good job of their villains and heroes and making them human and have multiple sides and backgrounds.
And the fact that Elsa is going to be in the new season of Once Upon a Time.
They jumped on that.
Anna
man.
and
They didn't skip a
Christopher.
beat.
Yeah.
Fast. They must have had talks before the movie came out or something. Oh, jeez.
Do we have any other questions?
No real questions, just more comments about villains and transitioning from good to bad and how that's interesting to watch. You know who are good real life, and also I've seen them fictionalized villains? Bonnie and Clyde.
Yes.
I love Bonnie and Clyde. Historical villains are fun.
That was another thing I saw on one of my lists of villain advice of try not to just go for the standard Nazi. Like it's okay to be inspired by historical events and stuff, but there's so much of that out there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, like the Book Thief handled that really well. There was this, you know, the villain
they were
was
using actual Nazis, right?
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But they, you know, it wasn't like, I don't feel like Liesel ever came head on to like one specific Nazi bill. It's like, you're the bad guy. It was just like the circumstance in which she was growing up in and having to live in this slowly Nazi-occupied Germany. People are dying and leaving and taken away and hiding, and that was the villain, her circumstance.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've actually seen a lot of people who'll be like, I've never read that book, I can't read it because I can't handle, like, Holocaust Nazi books or whatever. I'm like, it isn't really. Like, yeah, there's one Jew, it's really not a Holocaust. And people are like, I just can't handle those. I'm like, it's really not a Holocaust. It's a very personal book. Like, it's just about her life and how it's influenced by what's going on, but it's not really a Holocaust book at all.
I like roll my eyes at that anyway, because it's like, it's our history.
Yeah.
Humanity was capable of it, and you need to understand that so we never do it again.
I mean, I can understand, like, it being hard to, like, read a book that, like, takes place in a concentration camp or something like that, just because it's, like, really emotionally hard to read, and I can understand that. But, yeah, I'm like, you really need to give this book a chance, because it's nothing like any other Holocaust book I've read. It's really not about the Holocaust.
So beautifully written, and it is such a personal story, and it's not like, it's focused on the dark things of it, but also, like, the things that make the dark survivable, you know, and, like, people coming together, and the power of words, and family, and just
yes. And it's like one of those stories where like it could have been set during a different time. Like it didn't have to be, you know, like it's not really centered around the Holocaust. He could have like written it to be set during a different like major conflict. You know, like so I feel like that's why it's really not that much. You know, if you don't like Holocaust books, you should still give that one a chance because it's he could have written it in a different time period. That was the one he chose. You know, because it's about her personal story.
Yeah. So we've been going for an hour, almost on the nose. So do we want to start wrapping it up, or?
Yeah, we can do that. I'll take one last sleep for any kind of important comments that we have. Load. Erin is unsure about Elsa being on Once Upon a Time, since she's a new fairy tale character. Hopefully do it right. Yeah.
Except she is based on the Snow Queen, so technically she isn't a new fairy tale character. But I'm willing to give them a chance. Like I just want to see like how they're going to do it. You know? Yeah. Because I feel like every time they've like introduced something that I've been like, I don't know about this. Like I've been like, oh, actually they did a really cool thing with that. So. Yeah. Because we really have like no idea where they're going with the story. just that like Elsa, Anna, and Kristoff are going to be in it.
Mm-hmm. Going back to the Book Thief, one of the things I think is so useful is studying your world history outside of the big things, World War I, World War II types of things, because I think there's so many villains that have been in our world that are so realistic because it actually happened, and it's really easy to find a few of those and create your own villain based off of them.
Yeah.
Awesome inspiration.
And this, I'm just going to run down real quick because I just read a comment that kind of sparked something that I remembered we didn't talk about. Earlier we mentioned that a villain doesn't have to specifically be like, this person in front of you is the bad guy. Attack. There are a bunch of different kinds of narratives of, you know, conflict, person versus fate/God, person versus self, person versus person, person versus society, person versus nature, person versus supernatural. So I think it's interesting to play around with like not necessarily having a villain be like a physical embodiment of something evil, and maybe be something more ambiguous. That can be fun.
We could probably do a whole other chat about that somewhere down the line of like different types
ambiguity in a good way.
All right.
I think we're good on my end.
All right. Thank you for joining us for our live chat this week about villains. If you didn't get to watch all of it, it will be on our channel still. If we didn't get to answer your question, feel free to ask us on Twitter or Tumblr or the Word Nerds Facebook, and we will be sure to answer it as soon as possible. Tune in next week when we will be talking about something that will be revealed tomorrow. And don't forget to get your copy of Tiger Lily by, who's it by?
Jodi Lynn Anderson.
Jodi Lynn Anderson. It's our book club pick for this month, and it's going to be good. So we will see you all this week when you're watching all of our videos every day and liking and commenting on them, but also next week, 7:30 Eastern Standard Time at our next live chat.
Be there, be square.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.